For a long time we were the main power in Europe and we still have the largest colonial empire of them all. But after several military losses, including losing parts of Spanish Netherlands, we have lost our military glory. Additionally, economic mismanagement and massive corruption in our colonies have essentially stopped our economy from developing at all. This is all made worse by a bureaucratic gridlock and an ill and incompetent king. Then in February everything became even worse as the heir of the throne died and a great struggle began in the court upon who should be successor. One side, led by Queen Consort Maria Anna, favors a Habsburg succession, while an influential Cardinal Portocarrero and his side support a Bourbon candidate. Who will come out on top once Carlos II dies is anyone's guess, so while we wait we can start to improve our economic and bureaucratic situation. This means setting up and starting an economic recovery plan immediately to keep us from falling into the spiral of poverty. But before we invest a lot of money which we don't have, we will start colonial reforms to make their economies more effective and enrichen us as well. And we will start with the Council of the Indies. It has experienced significant decline in effectiveness and competence, something which we have to restore immediately. So we appointed qualified councillors. Then, to lessen all bureaucratic work, we created new consulados, small councils responsible for the infrastructure of their colonial area. This allowed us to finally resolve the bureaucratic gridlock. However, we couldn't continue to reform the Council of the Indies due to the local elite having too much power and stopping us. So, while we eliminate their influence, we will turn back to Spain. Since we had gained enough political power, we started taking steps to reform the administration. We also had enough money to invest into Madrid. Some months later, we started to promote state spending to help our commerce and industry to develop quicker. That's when the news of the king falling ill arrived, and with still no heir, the country is anxiously waiting for his death. It happened 1 month later and the regency was immediately established while his heir would be chosen. And it went surprisingly quick. While most had expected a stalemate between the Habsburg and Bourbon sides and the throne to be split, the Habsburgs had managed to outplay their opponent and gain significantly more influence in the court. So Charles III was declared the only legitimate heir of Carlos II, despite the risk of a French intervention. This also means our rivalry with Austria is completely gone and we will soon form a new Habsburg alliance with them to counteract the French anger. Most accepted the new king, including the regional estates of Aragon. However, the Castilian nobility is openly showing their dissatisfaction and support for Philip of Anjou, the Bourbon candidate. And in Navarre, a small resistance against Charles has even begun. If we don't do anything about this, there is a high risk a civil war is started, but first we have to wait for Austria to announce a Habsburg alliance. In the meantime, our new king decided to increase funding for the University of Madrid, enabling them to research more technology. Finally, the Austrians formed the Habsburg alliance and we could start to prepare for a French strike and end the unrest in our country, because it had gotten even worse as a massive protest took place in Madrid. We immediately began to crush this opposition that has spread to Andalusia, where we decided to kill the revolting people. That was when the news of the creation of the Anglo-French anti-Habsburg hegemony and that they had already declared war on Austria reached us. And as they did, we decided to immediately join our Habsburg ally in this war for our throne. We started our first offensive against the French in Aquitaine. But sadly, the legacy of our army continued and we failed miserably. Not wanting to throw more men into pointless battle, Charles III announced that we would only defend from now and instead focus on the pressing internal affairs. This meant to start combat inflation and French influence simultaneously. Then to go on a full offensive against the illegitimists. We gave our army the orders to crush the Navarre dissidents and occupy the region fully. However, resistance was much fiercer than expected and we were even sent out from our defensive lines in France. But after regrouping, we tried again slower, which went much better. While the French were close to advance past our defensive line, we managed to stop them, and with reinforcements from Spanish Naples, we managed to capture our first province from Navarre forces. It was an important one as well, as it allowed us to assault their capital from 2 directions. After capturing 2 more provinces around the city, we finally managed to enter it and destroy the Navarre resistance. With these news reaching the Castilian nobility, they decided to raise a pro-Bourbon army and started planning a march on Madrid. Not wanting to enter a civil war during a big war, we decided to try diplomacy, despite the small chances of it succeeding. Luckily, we managed to calm them down, at least temporarily. We immediately started setting up plans to turn the Castilian nobility to our side, but first Charles III finalized our economic reforms and promised to start invest heavily into our industry after the war, now that it is sealed. It was then when we found the solution to the civil war: privileges. By giving back a lot of influence and political power to the nobility, we managed to turn them to our side and safely divert the civil war. So with both the economy and political problems largely fixed, we can put our full focus on the war and our army. This meant starting modernization efforts. We will begin with the easy part, equipment. By increasing military production and developing our arms, our army will become larger and more effective. However, this won't help that much. What we need to address are the structural issues, which signifies an overhaul of our high command and a new doctrine. While we are mostly defensive, we chose to adopt an offensive doctrine, not only since we want to go on the offensive against France, but also since we have seen its success for Spanish Milan. Together with Austria, they completely annihilated Venice, and after a revolt in Hungary, they have sent help to the Austrians and already managed to capture Bratislava. They even encircled about 5 divisions in Žilina after an aggressive attack in Prešov. After about 70 days of reforming our army, Milan surprised us again. Having turned their forces to the south, the Hungarians weren't ready for their offensive, and as they broke through the defensive lines, they could both advance to the east and to the north. Soon Arad was captured and the Hungarians retreated from Pest. This allowed Milan and Austria to capture their capital and simply continue. Soon the only Hungarian cities left were the ones in Slovakia, and as they were captured, the Hungarian revolt surrendered. Meanwhile, in the east, the Austrians, together with some German states, have managed to start a liberation of Lorraine, clearly showing the French are weaker than ever. So with our army slightly reformed, we dared to try an offensive again. This time in the east, where only a single cavalry was defending. This allowed us to win our first battle against the French and enter their territory. However, suffering supply issues already, we decided to stop our offensive and try in the west instead. Here the French had several more divisions defending, however it didn't stop us since we managed to attack from 3 different provinces with a superior number of forces. As we broke through, we didn't stop like our other offensive. Instead, we managed to reach the outskirts of Bordeaux, but sadly got stopped due to low supply. Realizing our weakness, they started attacking and pushed us back almost all the way to our border. While this offensive might be seen as a failure once again, it has actually distracted the French and allowed the Austrians and Milanese troops to capture Strasbourg and go on a full offensive against the French. With the capturing of Besançon, they encircled Mulhouse and its garrisons and enabled the offensive to continue to the west. Since most French forces were under their 100% strength, the now famous Milanese infantry cut through their defenses and could march almost uncontestably towards Paris. And in only a few days they had managed to capture the French capital as well as Versailles. This means the French are willing to surrender. The only problem is that the English are still refusing, and the only way to make them is to probably invade England itself. However, our navy isn't strong enough or too far away to contest their naval power, but we do have naval superiority in the Bay of Biscay, so nothing is stopping us from naval invading Brittany and establishing a base there. And indeed, that was true. With only an unorganized garrison defending Lorient, we could capture the port, encircle Brest and later capture it. However, this didn't help our navy to establish naval superiority despite it being closer to the English Channel. So Charles III decided to change our short-term plan completely and also reveal his goal for the future of Spain. It is that we take over the lead in the Habsburg alliance to inherit the Austrian crown. Then we will also claim the Burgundian crown to enter the Habsburg family into a new golden age. He does have even more plans, but they will be revealed in the future. However, to succeed with them, France would need to cease to exist. The French have been defeated and all that is left to take over is England itself. While that might have been impossible before, we have started to send spies to their island and we are soon planning to infiltrate their navy. But first we will conclude our military reforms, for now at least. Because while we fought the French, we enacted a modern conscription, created a regimental system drastically reducing our supply consumption, and finally standardized our uniforms. While we will continue to strengthen our army further, having won against the French has shown that our army isn't begone anymore and ready to fight any foe. But reforming the military wasn't the only thing we did, since if we want to take over the Habsburg alliance we will need a larger industry than the Austrians. So our king started to invest heavily into manufactories, the Castilian countryside as well as Madrid. And one can already see the effects. During the last year our economy has almost doubled in size. Back to the war, our infiltration has been a massive success and our spies have sent us information to gain naval superiority in the English Channel. And with our troops ready we decided to launch the invasion before the English knew what was awaiting them. The only garrison they had was in Portsmouth, so Dover and the port east of London were captured. With no further defenses inland, their capital was captured and the English immediately demanded a peace deal. We accepted under the condition of the complete dismantling of the French monarchy. Wanting to save their own skin, they agreed to the split up of France between us and Austria. So the French nation and all its colonies ceased to exist, as French Canada also was split up. Now that we are finally at peace again, we can continue working on seizing the Habsburg alliance by growing our industry and also reforming our colonies. Starting with the latter. Having grabbed enough influence from the elites, we can at last finish reforming the Council of the Indies. We will do this by establishing royal monopolies to streamline the flow of goods home to Spain, and also reinforce the local garrison. Finally, that was all we needed to transform the Council of the Indies to an efficient and glorious administration. But we still have more to do in our colonies, since corruption is massive. However, instead of fighting it, we have decided to embrace it. More specifically, embracing the contraband trade. The next step is to integrate all the illegal trade rings. Luckily, everything went perfect and the issue of corruption doesn't exist anymore. Back at home, we had entered an economic golden age. With our economic reforms being massive successes, we are richer than ever before. There's still a problem though, the Austrians are also in a golden age. After they defeated the Ottomans, we are further away than ever to take over the Habsburg faction. We will try by invading nations ourselves, but if we don't manage to get enough factories, war will be the only option. However, let's start with our wealthy neighbor, Portugal. Having assembled 60 divisions on their border and with several more reserves, we declared war and immediately launched an all-out attack. Scarily enough, they actually managed to hold off most of our offensives. but we did eventually start to break through in some areas and threaten to split their country in several parts. However, they did manage to stop these offensives as well. Fearing a stalemate, we decided to do something unexpected, naval invading Lisbon. 10 divisions and our whole navy started assaulting its beaches, and with only a single division defending the city, it was soon ours. With now 10 divisions behind their defensive lines, we managed to cut their country in two and immediately started clearing out the south. We managed to encircle several divisions on our way to Portimao, and after capturing the city we encircled more than 10 divisions in Faro, who were all crushed. Meanwhile, in the north, we had diverted the Portuguese defenses away from Porto so that we could naval invade the city. It was a great success, and after we captured Braga, the Portuguese surrendered. We annexed all their lands in Iberia, stole their Brazilian colony and seized their navy. But we didn't get a hold of their African or Asian colonies. Despite this, you might think we are closer than ever to assume leadership over the Habsburg alliance. Sadly, that isn't true. We are further away than ever. This means we only have one option left: break away from the Habsburg alliance and declare war on Austria. Fortunately, the Austrian army is still at war with the Ottomans, so you won't be alone in this conflict. Additionally, our high command have already prepared a plan so as we formed the Spanish Habsburg alliance we could declare war in only 30 days. The plan is simple: to first capture all western territories including the Netherlands, then with our far superior navy we will naval invade the Austrians in the Balkans. As we declared war in December 1707, the Austrians hadn't managed to fill the whole front line, so we immediately launched an all-out attack. These gaps allowed us to gain a lot of ground and even encircle some divisions. Soon Lorraine joined the war on the Austrian side and we started attacking there as well. While everything went great at first, Austrian and German reinforcements soon started arriving, and due to our supply issues we decided to stop attacking and begin to build supply hubs instead. But our offensive didn't stop in the Netherlands, where after our puppet captured Amsterdam we managed to force the Dutch into a corner. Back to the main front, our supply hubs have been built and we started advancing north of Lyon. The battles were tough, but we could slowly advance towards Switzerland and threaten to split the Austrian front in two. While we managed to cross the river that was in our way, we eventually had to stop, suffering a lot from supply issues in the middle of the front. And with the Austrians effectively holding us back, we decided to completely skip the first step to clear out the west. Instead, we moved the majority of our troops to Spanish Naples to prepare a naval invasion. As we did, the Austrians managed to take back a lot of land, but it doesn't really matter since our focus is now in the Balkans. The first two naval invasions will be in Croatia, one in Zara and the other in Trieste. With almost complete naval superiority, both of our invasions were easily launched. In Trieste, the Austrians had a bunch of garrisons and managed to kill 2 of our divisions, but in Zara we managed to land and even capture Banja Luka, an important supply hub. The next invasion we launched was in Albania. Once again, half of the invasion force succeeded and the other half didn't. We captured Tirana and Vlore, but failed to seize Ioannina. Back in the north, we had captured Sarajevo and prepared our first ever cavalry charge towards Trieste. Hopefully this would turn to the breakthrough we have searched for so long. Our cavalry has changed everything. Vienna is captured and the Austrians are close to capitulating. All we need is to capture Bohemia. Starting from the north of Vienna, we began by assaulting Brno. We met a surprising amount of resistance, so it took a while, but soon we captured the city. About 2 weeks later, we arrived to Prague and managed to capture it as well. So the Austrians finally surrendered and we entered a peace deal. In it we got all Austrian and German lands while the Ottomans got back their Balkan holdings. Now that we are in control of Vienna and the whole of the Austrian Empire, Charles III has been crowned the Archduke of Austria and decided to combine the title with the Spanish crown to create the Habsburg Empire. But that wasn't all, he also reformed the crown of Burgundy now that we own much of its old lands. We can also not forget to take over the title of the Holy Roman Empire. Sadly, the Prussians have already taken the opportunity of a vacant post to annex most German states, but we will definitely get our revenge. Now, despite this loss, all our other victories have ensured that we have entered more than just an economic golden age. Our whole Habsburg Empire is in a golden or even heroic age. Back to the German issue, it is time to reveal our king's dream, a united Europe. And this can only be done by setting aside our religious differences and coming together as Christians. Then we offered all small European and even some African states to join us in the creation of the Empire of Europe. Surprisingly, most actually accepted and those who refused will be crushed. But first we declared the Empire of Europe and annexed all European states that had joined us. While they aren't cores just yet, having cored all of France and Portugal already, all the states will soon be completely integrated. And while we wait, let's begin to conquer the rest of Europe, starting in Italy. 4 nations had refused to join us: Tuscany, Modena Regio, Genoa and Savoy. The 3 smallest were easily crushed, but Savoy managed to use their mountainous terrain to hold us back for a long time. Nonetheless, our massive numerical superiority meant that we still achieved to capitulate them. Now that Italy is completely united, we can move our army to Germany. While there were plenty more states, this war was just as easy. Our massive army simply marched north, and as we arrived in Berlin, the Prussians surrendered and all other German states followed quickly. Threatening Sweden that we would intervene on Russia's side, they gave away their German lands and we have united all of Germany. However, we did have to recognize that Europe would stop at the Baltic Sea. And since we won't advance further into Ukraine, we only have one last region to liberate: the Balkans. With the Austrians already having crushed the majority of the Ottoman army, the war wasn't difficult. In the first few days we encircled all of Bosnia and advanced deep past the Ottoman defensive lines in Romania. As we arrived in Constantinople, the Ottomans accepted our peace proposal of a complete withdrawal out of Europe. So we are finally done with war in Europe as its mainland is united. We can now put our full focus on integrating everything, which surprisingly won't be that difficult since resistance is minimal. We will also start a massive colonization scheme now that our colonies are reformed, both in the Americas, Africa and in Asia. But this will end the video. Thanks so much for watching and please consider subscribing because the next video will be on the new DLC, something you don't want to miss. See you there.